So Phantom Forces just dropped one of the biggest updates we've had in years, and in my opinion, it's one of the best. Like literally, this is some of the most fun I've had on Phantom Forces in actual years. Now there are a ton of changes that the update brought, so I'm just going to go over what I think are the most important ones. So first of all, let's talk about the movement changes, because personally, I think these are the most important. Now the first change I want to go over is the gravity changes. So essentially, they lowered gravity. So you jump about the same height as before, you actually super jump a little higher, but regular jumps are the same. But basically, you just fall slower, and you have more control in the air as you're falling. And it's not to an unrealistic degree. Like, it doesn't feel like you're on the moon or anything, it just feels like you're athletic instead of a stack of bricks like every other update has been. Personally, I feel like this is the best change they've made. It makes the game feel so smooth, I love it. And they also added wall running, which is incredibly situational. You basically sprint up to a wall, jump and press C, and you can slide on it. It's pretty cool, I think it fits in the game. It's just, it's really hard to find a reason to use it at the moment, but it's pretty cool, and I'm never going to complain about getting more movement options. So the next thing I want to mention are the sliding changes. So the first thing to mention is that you can now start a slide in midair, so you can essentially jump, press C, and you'll still engage a slide even if you're not on the ground, which I think is awesome. And you can do this off buildings too, and if you hold shift to control your direction, you can fly around an air strafe like it's Titanfall. It's really cool. The next thing to mention about sliding is that weapon mobility now affects it less. So essentially, 2 years ago, all slides were the same speed no matter what walk speed weapon, but that made it so that if you knew how to like M-slide or just do slide tech really well, you could be flying around with like an HK-21 or an M107. So essentially, they made it so that weapon walk speed affects how fast your slide is. So faster weapons were now faster, and then slower weapons were slower sliding. And that's how it's been up until this update. Essentially, what this update does is that it cuts the effect about in half. So 2 years ago, the effect that walk speed had on sliding was 0%. Last update, it was 100. This update, it's about 50. So, like, Brass Knuckles still have a faster slide than the NTW, but Brass Knuckles are slower than they were last update, and the NTW is faster than it was last update when they're sliding. Which I feel like this is the kind of happy medium. Like, I don't know which version I prefer because they all have their strengths, but personally, I feel like this is the best balance that they found so far. And personally, I don't really care how they tweak this, as long as the game stays about the same speed, and it does. But right now, I quite like this current version because it buffs all the slow weapons, which I think they needed, but I will miss Lightspeed Brass Knuckles. They're still extremely fast, but they've been crazy for the past year. They also really buffed Zynga sliding, which is essentially where you slide off something and hit shift when you hit the ground, and it gives you a giant speed boost. Now, it used to be crazy strong, and then it was hella weak for the past year or two, but now it's finally back. It's not as good as it was in its glory days, but it's quite good right now, and I'm so happy they did that. Now they also added an optional stamina bar. Now you might be asking, why would you even use stamina? But essentially what it does is that it increases your slide speed and vastly reduces the cooldowns between slides, super jumps, but each one of those movements takes stamina, so essentially you can run out. And it's quite strong with certain weapons, but personally, I think it's cool to have, but I don't think I'm going to use it a lot, at least not until they buff it, because it doesn't feel that good on slow weapons, unfortunately, because those weapons require constant movement to be viable. And at the moment with stamina, even though it makes your slides faster, you could run out and it takes 10 seconds to fill. Now, you could use it even when it's low, but honestly, it's just not that good on slow weapons. But it's quite good on fast weapons like the Vector, and again, you might find it more useful than I do, but I'm probably not going to use it. And it should be noted that I am extremely glad it's a toggle, and I hope they never change that, because if I was forced to use stamina, this update would have been garbage. And it almost was garbage, because when they first implemented it, you could do basically 2.5 M slides and you were out. Now, luckily they fixed that and it no longer inhibits movement, but actually promotes it. But even if they mega buffed current stamina, I don't want to be forced to use it, and I don't really think anyone wants to. Like, I think having a toggle is extremely healthy for the game, and I hope they never change that. Because honestly, it doesn't fit everyone's playstyles, and adding something like this 8 years into the game's lifespan is just not a good idea to force people to use. Another good thing they're doing is they're buffing jump slides so that the timing window isn't so slow. So to do this slide, you just hit space C, and then shift right as soon as you hit the ground, and it gives you a big speed boost. It's about the same speed as M slides, which is the movement technique I'm doing in all of these clips, where you press C space, delay a little bit, and then space shift. But essentially it's nice because jump sliding was really hard to do before this update, but now it's honestly even easier than M sliding, so I like to see that they're making advanced movement more accessible for beginners and people who haven't learned things like M slide. Because both jump slides and M slides give a huge speed boost over normal slide canceling, so it's really nice to see that they're making it easier for people to get into that. Because for one, it brings a huge advantage, and for two, it just makes the game more fun. And I said it last update video, but I consider Phantom Forces to be a movement shooter, so anything they do to encourage movement, I think is an awesome change. There are more movement changes, but a lot of them are very technical, like they reprogrammed a lot of stuff to act a little differently. It's nothing huge, I went over the important stuff, but if you're interested in that side, go check the patch notes, there's a lot of info in there. I put it in the pinned comment in the description. But overall, about the movement, I just want to say that I'm extremely happy with it. I think it feels phenomenal, it feels 10 times better than the last update. And personally, I am extremely glad with the direction they're taking this game now, because it feels like for the past few years, they've constantly been trying to nerf advanced movement, and this update, it feels like they finally decided to embrace it. Like they literally added console tips for Zynga sliding and stand sliding, and that makes me so happy because they're leaning into the side of the game that makes it popular. Like this game is popular because of its movement and because of how dynamic it is, and I'm glad to see them finally embracing that, which is why I think it's one of the best updates we've ever had. Now, of course, there are some bad changes still, like they reprogrammed vaulting, so it works a little differently, but that broke long jumping tech, so that upset a lot of people in the movement community. But personally, I feel like we gained more than we lost, because average gameplay feels phenomenal, even if we did lose a little bit of movement tech like that. Also, in the middle of the night last night, they dropped one more movement change. So essentially, you can no longer slide into prone, you can only go prone once the slide is complete. So you're going to be crouching after a slide. So even if you press C twice like before, you won't end up laying down. Instead, you'll just be crouching, and then you have to press C again to go all the way to the floor. And the reason they did this is because there was a super broken movement technique that lets you literally slide around on the floor while prone or something like that. I don't know, I never saw anyone do it, but apparently it was broken as hell to the point that like the game's player count immediately dropped because they were in like every server, according to one of the stylist staff that I was talking to on Discord. But I find it annoying that they couldn't figure out a way to fix it without removing fundamental movement techniques. I hope they're able to bring it back later on once they figure out how to do it better, but with the devs' track record, I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm just putting this in the video because the more people know about it and can complain about it, the more likely it's going to get fixed. But as usual, if you're going to talk to the devs or complain about the game, make it constructive, don't be a jerk. That should go without saying. But let's continue. So the next thing I want to talk about from this update is the gun sway changes. Essentially, they changed a lot of the animations for much of the guns and added new stats for that, so a lot of guns acted differently. And what I've noticed is that a lot of them have more like sway. Like if you move left and right, the reticle is going to bounce up and down a lot. This isn't the same for all weapons. Again, it's pretty unique to each weapon. And a lot of the guns I've tested, especially snipers, actually feel more accurate. But then again, that's just my experience. Some people don't like it and say they feel less accurate. And while, again, a lot of that is because the animations are much more fluid, who knows where that's going to go in the future. Like, if they keep trying to give it more realistic gun sway, that's obviously not going to fit in an arcade game like Phantom Forces. And it makes me a little worried for the future. Like, it's fine now, the animations are really fluid, I'm hitting shots. It affects jump shots a little bit, especially with automatic weapons, but it's not anything crazy. Like, you'll hit about the same amount of shots as you would last update. And ironically, with snipers, I've been hitting more jump shots. But my main concern is where this is going to go in the future, because again, this is not a realistic game. The whole point is that you are basically a super soldier. So I want to be able to run around spraying an M60 if I want to. So these changes worry me a little bit, but at the moment, it's fine. Although one thing to note though is that I've heard that the new weapon sway really messes up trick shotting in extreme cases. I don't know too much about that. You'll have to ask the people who said that. I just saw it said on Discord a few times, so I just thought I'd mention it though, because it's also possible there are other problems that this update has that I'm not even aware of. Leave those in the comments. Now the third major thing I want to mention, and what I think is probably one of the coolest, is that they're buffing the hell out of like 7 different snipers. Like the sniper class just got a giant upgrade. And if you know me, you know that an update that buffs movement and snipers is easily top 3 updates of all time, especially with how much they've been nerfed in recent years. So, I'm not going to go over all the changes, you can check the patch notes, I put them in the description and the pinned comment. But essentially, the Mosin has a torso kill range now, it's fast as hell, the K14 has a higher torso range, it's faster I think, they buffed the intervention to be stronger than it ever has been, so it has 50 RPM now, with 160 torso kill range, which is higher than it's ever been in its entire lifespan, which I think is awesome. And I've been advocating for this for years. I'm just so glad to see they're finally deciding to buff the snipers like they need. Because again, I mentioned it in every sniper video, but in order for snipers to be in a good place in this game, they have to be strong because of how strong automatics are. And it finally feels like the devs are starting to understand that and buffing snipers to where they need to be. One of them that is broken as hell though is the M107. As you can see in a lot of the clips here, they made that thing nutty. So it torso kills to 280 studs, it's got better handling than last time, better mobility, better scope speed, and 320 fire rate, but it actually has low enough recoil for you to use that effectively. So these snipers as a whole are going crazy right now, especially the M107. I would recommend getting on that train as soon as possible because it is a great time to be a sniper main. We are eating well. And finally, the two last changes I want to mention. First one being damage numbers. I think that's great. It's another great intel tool. You don't have to count damage as much. If you throw grenades, you can see exactly where someone was when they took damage. Great change. And the final thing I want to mention are keybinds. Not much needs to be said about those. It's an awesome change, but I'm sure you already know what's possible with those. You don't really need my thoughts. You can actually make it so that you can now jump without vaulting. So you can actually bind a certain key for vaulting, and then a certain key for jumping without vaulting. So, essentially, if you never want to vault again, you don't have to. You can put space for jumping, and then alt for jumping with a vault, and you can now choose when you want to vault. I think that's awesome because it absolutely kills my mood when I die by vaulting. So, it's really nice to see that you can finally change this. Now, as you saw in the title, there is one big issue that I have with this update, and that is the fact that they heavily reduced the spawn timer. So previously, it was 3 seconds for normal spawns and 5 seconds for team spawns. Now it's 1 second for normal spawns and 3 for team spawns, which makes matches incredibly hectic. And the issue is that because spawns in Phantom Forces are so bad, you can literally spawn, get killed, spawn again in the same spawn, making it just a stupid trade kill fest that punishes both parties. And previously, with the longer spawn timer, this didn't happen nearly as much. And it takes a lot of the strategy out of the game and makes maps a lot more hectic. And I wouldn't mind a spawn reduction, but I don't think it works on every map, and honestly, I just think they reduced it too much. Because again, like, if you kill someone, they literally have 1 second and they might spawn right back next to you, and you gotta be ready again. And you could kill him again, but that sucks for the guy you killed, he didn't have a fair chance. And then if you get killed, that sucks for you because he just spawned near you again and now can get revenge immediately. You don't have time to reposition. Like before, you would have adequate time to react because they'd have a 3-second spawn timer, so even if they wanted to come back and get you, it's a fair fight. But now it's like a very hectic trade kill fest that punishes both sides. Now it's not game breaking or anything, but this type of thing is really frustrating for a lot of people, especially new players, which is really unfortunate. That's about all I have for this update though. And honestly, even though it has its issues, like, I'm gonna be pretty pissed if we never get prone sliding back. Like, I really hope they look into it, but even with that, it's probably the most fun I've had on Phantom Forces in years. I absolutely love it. And if you made it this far into the video, you're actually a real one, please comment down below. I'm genuinely curious who did. Let me know your thoughts about the update in the comments, subscribe, and bye.